All right. So put this mind map together. The topic moves across, a few different areas from genes to neurons to the whole brain, and it's easy to treat them as separate things, but they're all very interconnected. So I built the mind map to follow that scale deliberately, starting at the small with genes and moving out. And that idea of the building blocks is sort of the thread running through this whole mind map. I started with genes, the smallest scale. Mapped the chromosomes as the structure that carries the genes, building blocks for the genes, and then split the distinction that you always have to keep straight genotype versus phenotype. Genotype is the set of genes that you inherit from your parents, and phenotype is the observable traits that actually show up, splitting off from the genetics there. Epigenetics added that because it completes sort of the genetic picture, the environmental cues that are altered after the gene expression. Environmental cues can alter how the genes are expressed, which is the first hint in the map that your biology isn't just pure destiny. It can also include genetic disorders, a fragile X, along with behavior clusters we can scan for in autism. So the genetic branch connected to something observable. The next branch zooms out to neurons, which I framed as the core of the building blocks of the mind. I mapped parts in the order of the signal that actually travel through them. So beginning at the cell body, which holds the genetic material, and then dendrites with the branches that receptors that absorb neurotransmitters, the cell body, the axon, the tail that sends the signal onward, and there's variation in the formation of the axons. It can go like long into from where the axons form in the spine and the rest of the body, and the axon tends to be smaller in the brain. And the action potential is a worthy part of adding into the neuron because they all fire all at once and cascade onto other neurons. Laying the neuron out as a pathway rather than a labeled diagram helped me see it as a unit that receives and decides and passes on information. And that same sort of logic scales up towards the brain. The last branch zooms all the way out to the brain itself, which I've organized from the most primitive structures, which is the brain stem, midbrain, pons, medulla, that regulate, essential biological function. And then, the essential functions that keep you alive without thinking about it. And then the limbic system is the amygdala, hippocampus, thalamus, hypothalamus, which is emotional and regulatory core of the system, your brain system. Then the cerebral cortex with its four lobes, frontal, occipital, parietal, temporal, and other specific regions, prefrontal cortex, motor cortex, primary somatosensory cortex. I also included the corpus callosum, the bridge that connects the two hemispheres and lets them communicate. So ordering from the brainstem upwards helped me see it as layers that were built on top of each other. And the reason I structured my scale from genes to neurons to the brain is that shows that each level is constructed from the one below it. Working sort of from smallest to largest. Genes build the proteins that build the neurons. Neurons wire together into the structure of the brain, and the brain produces the behavior. By slipping in epigenetics at the start, I reminded myself that the environment reaches back down through all those levels. So it's not one directional. This map is sort of a record of me trying to hold the entire biological basis of behavior instead of treating it as separate individual little things.